All right, let's dive in. Juan Perón. He's one of those figures in history that people either love or hate, right? Super divisive. So today, we're going to try and get to the heart of who he was by looking at 5 key moments that really, I think, defined his entire life and legacy. So let's start with this quote from Leonardo Fabio: "Where you see blood, Peronism did not pass through there." Now, that's a pretty provocative statement, right? Especially for such a controversial figure. But it gets at something really crucial we need to understand about Perón. To really get him, we have to peel back the layers of myth and look at the choices he made. Choices that, as we'll see, often prioritized the long game, time, over immediate, bloody conflict. Okay, so moment 1, the professor of politics. And for this, we're actually going way back, long before he was ever president. We're talking 1932. At this point, Perón is a military history professor, and he's deep in the books trying to figure out what conflict is really all about. And he gets obsessed with this guy, the famous theorist of war, Karl von Clausewitz, the one who said, "War is the continuation of politics by other means." For Perón, this was a light bulb moment. He realized, hey, war isn't just about blowing things up. It's a tool. It's an act of force you use to make your enemy do what you want. It's all about imposing your will. And he takes this idea and applies it to Argentina's biggest hero, José de San Martín. He says, look, San Martín wasn't just a general. He was a conductor and a maestro. Think about that. A conductor who strategically directs the whole orchestra of conflict, and a teacher, a maestro, who educates the people, who brings them along. That duality, that's what Perón believed made a true leader. And you can bet he was taking notes for himself. So let's just break that down. What's the foundation he's building here? First, you can't get politics if you don't get history. Second, politics is conflict management. It's a constant push and pull. And the leader's job? To be both that conductor and that teacher. And here's the kicker. For him, just teaching, just passing on knowledge, is a political act in itself. You see what's happening? Way back then, he's already seeing politics as this constant, managed war, and he's getting ready to be the one in charge. All right, moment 2, the revolution of happiness. So, with that whole philosophy brewing in his mind, let's fast forward to his grand entrance onto the political stage. We're talking October 17th, 1945, a day that honestly flipped Argentina on its head forever. So the scene is this. Huge crowds have gathered. They're demanding he be released from prison. And he is. He walks out onto the balcony of the Casa Rosada, the presidential palace. And what's the very first word out of his mouth? Not Argentinians, not citizens. It was trabajadores, workers. Bam! In one single word, he named his army. He told them, "You are my people." And then he says this: "It is the ambition of my life that all workers may be a little bit happier." Now that might sound simple, but it was absolutely revolutionary. No leader in Argentina had ever talked like that. Suddenly, happiness wasn't something you pursued on your own. It was a political project. It was the government's job to make the people happy. And this gets to the heart of what made his movement so different. It wasn't presented as some grim, miserable fight. No. As Leonardo Fabio said, it was a revolution that passes through joy. It was cheerful. It was vital. It was a party. The goal, the ultimate prize, was the people's happiness. This completely changed the whole vibe of what politics felt like in Argentina. Okay, so if you're going to build a whole new political movement, you need a new story for the nation, right? So what does Perón do? He decides to rewrite the story of the country's old heroes. And that brings us to moment 3, rewriting national heroes. The year is 1950, and it's been declared the year of San Martín. Now, think about the standard image of a national hero, the guy on the money. For San Martín, that image was always of this very proper, European-looking general. He looked white, academic, kind of stiff and distant, an elite figure from the history books. But Perón, he digs up this little-known portrait for the big national celebration. And this one is totally different. This San Martín has darker skin. He looks more rugged, more American. And get this, the painter wasn't some fancy European artist. It was a guy named Gilday de Castro, a Peruvian mulatto who had been emancipated, a man freed by the very revolutions San Martín led. The symbolism is just wow. This was so much more than just picking a picture. It was a massive political statement. As the writer Leopoldo Marechal put it, knowledge precedes love. He who does not know the people fears them. What Perón was saying is that real history, the real story of a nation, doesn't come from the elites. It comes from the people. And if you're going to lead them, you can't fear them. You have to know them. And to know them, truly, is to love them. Which brings us to a really intense moment. Moment 4, time over blood. The year is 1955, and everything is about to come crashing down. Perón is facing a violent military coup, and he has to make a choice that will echo for the rest of his life. Okay, so the military just bombed the Plaza de Mayo, right in the heart of Buenos Aires. Hundreds of civilians are dead. Perón is at a fork in the road. On one hand, he could choose blood. He could call on his millions of supporters, give them weapons, and fight back. But that means a brutal, full-scale civil war. The other path? Time. He could call for calm, accept exile, and play the long game, preserving his movement for another day. And what does he do? He gets on national radio and tells everyone to go home. He actively stops them from fighting back. He says, "I ask you to be calm. I do not want one more man of the people to die." Think about that. It was a hugely controversial move. But it goes right back to that idea of the conductor, doesn't it? His job wasn't just to win the battle, but to manage the conflict to prevent the ultimate disaster, a nation killing itself. That choice cost him everything, personally. It led to 17 years in exile, 17 long, lonely years. And you can feel the pain in this quote about his late wife, Evita. "Of the two of us, Evita is the happiest. She is at least in her land. I am far away." He chose time over blood, but man, the personal price he paid was just immense. And that long, long wait culminates in our 5th and final moment, the final fated return. Picture this. It's a rainy day in November 1972, and after all this time, he's finally coming home. 17 years. He said himself that for every single day of those 17 years, the only thing he thought about was his return. And listen, he's over 70 years old at this point. He knows this trip could literally kill him. But he didn't talk about it like a power play. He saw it as a debt he had to pay. He said, "I feel I have an enormous debt to the Argentine people." It was a debt of love, a debt of loyalty to the millions who never gave up on him for almost 20 years. And really, that's what it all comes down to. You can't separate Perón's story from this incredibly intense bond he had with his people. Which leads to this final question. What happens when a political movement is also a love story? Because that's what this was. A story that created unbelievable loyalty, but also led to tragic conflict. And it left a legacy that, to this day, makes you question everything you think you know about politics, power, and the people.